1. My first job in London was providing first and second line of support to a reporting software my company built and sold to clients in the financial sector. We had two types of clients, hosted or in-house install. While the first were easy to debug, log into their environment, replicate the assets, all while having full access to the back end. The others were less so for obvious reasons, yet we kept a virtually stale copy of their initial environment to provide some semblance of support. This story, obviously, is about the latter type. The software itself was like Tableau, in which you add objects to a sheet, graphics, tables, images, to create a template, and the workflow fills in the latest data as often as you want it, daily, weekly, monthly, and generates the final report in the format you want, the most common being Word or PDF. Also, the software used a proprietary third-party software to convert Word documents to PDF. Don't recall which one it was, but we would buy the license ourselves and would give it to the client for their in-house install. We didn't only recommend this software in our install documentation, but insisted that they use it since our product only supported this vendor in particular, meaning it could probably work with others, but we only tested this particular one, so could only ensure it works as expected with it and alone. So the ticket in question was floating around for a while, bouncing from one support member to another, and no one could figure it out. We were only 4 in the support team, so it was bound to land on my plate eventually. Also, side note, I was the youngest by far in the team, and my imposter syndrome was high, so I was dreading my turn to have a go at this issue. The problem was that the generated PDF reports were showing the objects completely misaligned compared to what they were supposed to look like. Moreover, this only happened when generating PDFs. Word docs came out as expected. So, being an in-house installation, we could only try to replicate it on our end to no avail. A coworker tried to get a copy of their database to get our environment in line with the client's, but that was turned down because of sensitive information that they couldn't share. What's the point of non-disclosure contracts? Another coworker tried a screen sharing session, but all it helped for was to see the report being generated incorrectly, since their IT team wouldn't let us take a look at the back end and see if the software was installed properly. By then, the client was getting impatient with how long it was taking for this issue to be resolved, so having this information telling me how tied my hands were, plus the pressure of being the last line of defense, I do the first thing I can come up with. I check an Acrobat Reader who is a PDF producer of the file the client sent. Usually you would expect to see the name of the third-party software as a creator, but lo and behold, the client was using some other tool for the PDF conversion. Why? As I said, we provided the license for free, so it wasn't a matter of saving pennies. So I happily sent my report to the client stating, unfortunately, you're using a software we don't support. Please use the supplied product as specified in our documentation. One would expect the issue to be closed. The client was caught red-handed using our software incorrectly, thus in breach of contract. However, of course, this was not the case. All I got in return was a condescending reply to my email, CCing the account manager at our company, and my boss stating, "This is ridiculous." Account manager's name, "This is taking long enough. Can't someone fix the damn problem?" I wish I could say the story had a satisfying ending, but unfortunately for me, my company was too British in their mentality and followed the creed of the customer is always right. I didn't hear back on this issue, and luckily that client didn't raise many tickets, so I didn't have to deal with them again. My guess is that the AM had to convince them to use a third-party software supplied, but I never asked her how that discussion went. All I got was a chuckle from the rest of the team saying, "How didn't I think of that before?" And a pat on the back from my manager, which would come back and haunt me for the rest of my days at that company, since I became known as the last resort guy, which meant I had to deal with all the troublesome tickets. 2. So back in January, I installed a Google Mesh system in my parents' home, so they could have better network coverage in their house, as the ISP-provided router wasn't powerful enough to cover the entire house. The mesh system is of the 2nd gen Google Wi-Fi system, not the newer Nest Wi-Fi stuff. Now, if you don't know how a mesh network is set up, you have one main router and several access points which relays the connection around the house. They all wirelessly connect to each other and provide a stable and reliable connection around the house you set the points up in, as long as you set them up within reasonable range. In our case, we had the main point in my dad's office directly connected to the ISP router, and 2 relays placed in the hallway and in the living room. This system worked perfect and was pretty reliable up until this story. One morning, I wake up to something like 7 or 8 missed calls from my mom. Apparently, that morning, there had been a few powerful lightning strikes in the area where they live. And the power was all out for a while until my dad hooked up the power generator to the house. However, when they got everything back up and running, they noticed there was no network in the house at all. So I started going through all the usual troubleshooting steps I could before I had to go to work, which wasn't really that much. Check everything's connected properly, both on the main router and the mesh system. Check if my dad has a wire connection to his desktop. Check our files server for network connection. And finally, reboot absolutely everything. Router, mesh, everything that has to do with the network. Once it was all back up and running again. Still nothing. So I started thinking the main line into the entire village that provides the ADSL network for the village could be shot, or maybe a base situation. So I checked the IP status page for any eventual line disconnects or errors, which I found none. So I told my parents just to live off cellular connection as much as possible for the day. Before I headed to work, then we'd look into it more when I got back home. Later that day, I got a call from my mom and was told that apparently some techs that worked for a contractor company our ISP uses just out of nowhere contacted my dad and told him they would come up to their house and replace their main modem, as they had apparently seen some irregularities. How the hell were they able to see that? I have no idea. But I had figured earlier that day that the modem probably was shot, since I never saw any errors on the ISP status page. So my dad somehow managed to set up the ISP router himself with the correct settings, and the main network went back up. However, it wasn't really working as it should. As I said, I installed the Google Mesh system in their house so they would have proper connection all around the house. However, from that morning, the mesh network didn't work at all. They asked me a few times throughout the week what the issue could be, but the little troubleshooting I was able to do earlier in the week never really told me anything. We checked connections, rebooted, nothing worked. For information, I live 5 hours away from my parents by car, and I don't have a car, so it wasn't really an option to get to their house and do the troubleshooting myself. So this all had to be done over the phone, which is hard enough when you work with IT competent people, but even harder when you talk with someone who doesn't really know much more than the basics to operate their computer and smartphone on a day-to-day basis. So this morning we went haywire in getting the mesh network back up and running, as well as figuring out what in the fuck actually brought it down in the first place. The first thing we did was the usual textbook stuff: reboot, check connections, all that simple stuff. After all that was done and we were still stuck with the same result, it hit me. Every router had some sort of status LED that lights up in all kinds of colors to indicate the status of the router. In the case of these Google Wi-Fi points, it's the following: white for everything's okay, blinking blue for both working and ready for setup, solid blue for factory reset in progress, blinking orange for no connection, blinking red when something's wrong with the router. This hit me way too late, so out of nowhere I pulled up the Google support page that shows what colors mean before I asked my dad, what color is the front LED on the router? To my unexpected surprise, I get back, it's blinking orange. At this point, I just smashed my head in the desk and immediately had an idea of what the issue could be. So I immediately told my dad to go downstairs, grab one of the 2 mesh points I had put there, and bring it upstairs. After 5 minutes, we had a new point upstairs in my dad's office connected and powering on. Wouldn't you guess, it got a connection right away. It was also 10 times quicker at starting up. This immediately confirmed my suspicion. What had happened was the lightning that fried our main router also managed to fry parts of the motherboard in the Google Wi-Fi point that was directly connected to the router with a cable. Therefore, the Ethernet in the port was fried, and the router didn't receive any network signal in. So what we had to do was reset the entire mesh network, set up one of the other routers as the main router, and the 2 others as relays again in the same positions, and voila, it all was up and running again. Now, even though we got it all back up and running, I have set up a warranty case with Google to see if we can get this replaced, but until then, the partially dead point serves as the hallway mesh point. So, moral of the story, if you know there's gonna be any sort of lightning in your area, please make sure to disconnect any network equipment that is critical and could be killed easily if lightning strikes. 3. I work for a small OEM company that builds PCs and sells them via different distributors. To find out anything about any configuration we made, we'd prefer to work off the serial number, as this is unique to every single device. We also have similar configurations which only differ by which main board is used, or another CPU that is used, and all those tiny differences that make a big difference at the end. Today I got a very interesting exchange with a customer that I helped figure out what he wanted, but I did it wrong. His first email was as follows.
Dear company, 2 years ago I bought a PC with Windows, but I wish the Windows disk was bigger. Now I want to use a bigger one. Can you tell me what RAM is installed? Manufacturer and how many slots are available, 4x4 or 2x8 RAM installed, and if the RAM I want to install would fit. Sadly, I have no documents regarding this PC, and I have no product name, and I don't want to take the PC out of the desk just to see if a serial number might be on the back, or to open the case to see how many slots are available. You have to know this kind of information and be able to tell me if I can do that. List of specs like CPU, GPU, amount of disk space on C and D, 64x Windows 10. I want to use this RAM and I want to know if it is compatible.
My response was as this. Dear customer, sadly I can't provide you the correct information without a serial number. There is a freeware called Specky that reads all the system data and gives you information like product names and the components of such. With the product name, you can easily search those on the manufacturer's site and find all the needed information. This is a Google Translate of his response.
Thank you very much for your helpful tip with the Specky. That worked wonderfully. And now I know what I have. Of course, this is a quick solution, but not really what you mean by the customer is king. Or customer-friendly service. Smiley winky face. Therefore, I have to say that it would be customer-friendly not only to clip the old serial numbers on the back of the computer, but to store them somewhere under the driver files on the computer. Who is constantly crawling under the desk where he has to determine a tiny number with a flashlight, just because he wants some information from the manufacturer? This is really tedious, especially when you have a dozen cables hanging on the computer, all of which just barely reach the socket. Or do you really expect that we all have desks in the middle of the room? As you can see, that's a typical male way of thinking. Definition of men's thinking, construction of coffee machines with ultra-modern equipment, and in the end all the pots spill because they let their women make coffee for them. For advertising companies like you make all sorts of changes so that it flashes everywhere. The customer is led to some partner site and the company logo appears permanently. A little more customer friendliness would be a good idea if you don't provide any support without a serial number. And why do you actually need a serial number to determine the number and size of the RAM banks? And let's be honest, that is completely superfluous to this question. Even for a possible reason, that is not enough. The support of a manufacturer should actually know what he has sold. You would surely see that as well. You only need to collect the data sheets of the computers on offer, and write the date of the offer on it. Then you can determine within a few minutes which complete systems you sold 2 years ago. I don't know, but sometimes companies really trip themselves up because they don't come up with the simplest ideas. I just threw a product out of my company because they had such shitty support and overlooked the system with customer-unfriendly nerd functions. On the other hand, I also recommend computers to my company, and they are constantly buying new computers for their more than 200 partner companies throughout the country. You certainly want to shine in your job, so you can bring it in as an innovative suggestion. Sometimes there is even a financial bonus for this. That was a comment, as I said. You helped me, so thank you and have a nice weekend.
I am unsure what to do with this insightful tip. I forwarded it to my co-workers and my superior. Hopefully they can figure it out. 4. I am a full-stack web developer, mostly working on developing and maintaining e-commerce sites using my company's in-house platform. We do support and maintenance as well as new sites and features, but aren't expected to support end users directly. However, we occasionally, or in the case of this site that features in this story, not so rarely, get end user issues forwarded to us if the client's help desk can't fix it. This particular site is healthcare adjacent. I'm not in the US, so HIPAA doesn't apply, but data security is still a particularly big deal for this site, compared to some of our other clients, and security or customer data is a big deal for everyone these days. In the far-off days before the pandemic, I'd been working for months on a major new feature that allowed customers to use the site in a different way than before. It touched almost every part of the site and presented some fairly unique problems. We had to request a new feature be added to the in-house platform just for this, which necessitated deferring the major new feature's completion until a separate project to migrate the site through a major version of the platform. Finally, everything is completed, tested, and signed off. The big release goes fairly smoothly, and major new feature appears to be working, and we pat ourselves on the back and relax. Cut to shortly after we get in the following morning. A customer who placed a single order is receiving hundreds of order confirmation emails. He provides a screenshot of his flooded inbox. Virtually all e-commerce sites have transactional emails, and this has more than many, along with optional text message notifications. One of the implications of the major new feature is that it's no longer completely trivial to decide who should be notified by what method about updates to a given order or account. I've written a new piece of code that abstracts away all this decision-making into one place. Obviously, I've got something terribly wrong. Are we sending every email update to the same person? This guy? Worse, are we sending every update to everyone and this guy's just the first to report it? Either way, it sounds like a significant data security breach on the site that I would least like to have a data breach on, and is definitely my fault. It's panic stations. I start looking frantically at my new code in the database, while our senior dev gets into the logs. I have just found the mildly reassuring information that the number of emails the customer appears to have received a minute. He's refreshing the page 10 times a minute for an hour. We assume that is some kind of browser extension or something. A quick proof of concept confirms that you can indeed generate multiple confirmation emails by refreshing that page, which I hasten to add is not okay, and we immediately put a ticket in to fix it. But this bug appears to have been in the site for years, since before I joined the company. Of all the days for it to come to light. Five. I work IT help desk at a university. I thought you guys might find this mildly entertaining, if not frustrating. This time of year we get many requests for account resets, unlocks, and just general access assistance, as students shake off the rust of summer and prepare for the semester. This particular university has a high percentage of older students as well, older being over 30. Students, particularly the older students, tend to call in very stressed over what is normally a very simple issue. Most of my job around this time is usually more focused on calming the user down enough to walk them through what they have to do to gain account access. One call I received from an older gentleman went like this: "You've reached the university help desk. How can I assist you today?"
"Your system isn't working."
"What seems to be the issue, sir?"
"It won't go.
It's not doing what it's supposed to do.
Okay, well, what system are you working with?
I'm trying to access my account, but your system is shit.
Okay, please provide me with your ID number, and I can take a look at the account. I get the number, take a look at the account, and nothing seems to be wrong. Sir, are you getting any error messages when you try to log in?
No, it's just not going. You really need to come up with a better way of doing this.
I understand, sir, but let's focus on making sure you can get into the account for now. What happens when you try to log in?
You aren't listening to me. Nothing happens. It just doesn't work.
Okay, walk me through it step by step. You get to the landing page.
Yeah?
You see the sign-in button.
Yeah?
Okay, what happens when you click the sign-in button?
Nothing. How many times do I have to say it?
Alright, sir. Well, can you describe to me what you see on that page right now?
I just see open link in new page, open link in new tab, save link as...
Ugh. I mentally facepalm. This can't be happening. This has to be a goddamn nightmare. Sir, when you click on the sign in button, are you clicking on the right mouse button or the left mouse button?
What the fuck do you think? I'm clicking the right mouse button.
This is going to sound weird, but do me a favor and try clicking the left mouse button.
Wow, that worked. I can enter my credentials. You know, you guys really need to fix your goddamn system. It's really not obvious what you need to do. Terrible service.
You have a great day, sir. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Terrific Tales of Technology, Episode 17. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do like and subscribe and share the video with all your friends and family. If you don't know how to do this, then leave a message, I'll talk you through it. If you don't know how to leave a message, well then I'm afraid we may have come to an impasse. Okay, this goes out, what, Monday? I'm recording in advance, so time is illusory, time is irrelevant to me right now. Let's see. Yeah, Monday, this goes up on Monday. Okay, I don't think I have any shout-outs, so that's fine. No birthdays, that's also fine. I do have some coming up, though, but none right now. Okay, with that, I think I'm going to head off for now, because it's been a very long recording session for me. Not that you guys know, because this is edited video going up, but I recorded these live. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.